In the early hours of June 8th, 2018, the world lost one of its most iconic and influential voices in the realm of food and travel. Anthony Bourdain, a man whose raw storytelling and fearless exploration captivated millions, was found dead in a small hotel room in France. For years, Bourdain had battled demons that no one could fully see. Despite his success, he struggled with mental health issues, addiction, and a deepening sense of isolation. Friends and colleagues had noticed a change in his demeanor in the weeks leading up to his death, but no one could have predicted how quickly things would spiral. This is the story of Anthony Bourdain's last day on Earth. A day filled with contradictions, a picturesque setting, an outwardly calm exterior, and the crushing weight of a man who had finally reached his breaking point. Part 1. The Calm Before the Storm. On June the 7th, 2018, Anthony Bourdain's life seemed like it was following a familiar pattern. He was in France, filming yet another episode of Parts Unknown, exploring the Alsace region alongside his close friend and fellow chef, Eric Rippert. For most, it looked like just another day in the life of one of the world's most celebrated travel personalities, visiting picturesque towns, savouring the local cuisine, and engaging with the world in the way that only Bourdain could. But under the surface, things weren't as they seemed. The evening was uneventful. Bourdain and Rippert dined at their hotel, Le Chambord, enjoying what would become their last meal together. By all appearances, nothing was out of the ordinary. Bourdain, who had spent decades capturing the world's most remote and vibrant locations, appeared to be his usual self, focused, immersed in the experience. But was everything really okay? Despite the casual atmosphere of that dinner, something had shifted. Those close to him had noticed that his mood had darkened in recent days. He seemed more withdrawn, distant, and less present than usual. And while Bourdain had always carried an air of mystery, this time, something was different. Could anyone have predicted what would happen just a few hours later? The morning of June 8th would be different. Bourdain was expected at breakfast with Rippert, but when the time came, he didn't show. At first, there was no real alarm. Maybe he overslept, or maybe he was just taking some time for himself. But as the minutes ticked by and Bourdain remained unreachable, Rippert's concern started to grow. What happened in those last few hours? Had there been any signs, anything that would have hinted at the tragedy that was about to unfold? For a man who had spent his life on the move, travelling from one exotic location to the next, it would be a quiet hotel room in a small French village where Anthony Bourdain's journey would abruptly and tragically come to an end. Part 2. The Unseen Struggles. On the surface, Anthony Bourdain had it all: fame, fortune, respect, and a job that most people could only dream of. But what no one saw was the constant battle he was fighting beneath the surface. Bourdain wasn't just a globetrotter in search of the perfect meal. He was a man searching for peace. A man who had been wrestling with inner demons for most of his life. But how could someone who seemed to be living the ultimate dream feel so lost? Bourdain had never been one to hide his past struggles. He openly discussed his battles with heroin and cocaine during his early years in the kitchen. But addiction wasn't his only fight. Beneath his rugged, rebellious exterior was a man plagued by crippling depression. He had built a career on being brutally honest about the world. Yet when it came to his own pain, he remained remarkably private. Was it pride? Or was it fear of exposing the truth to those who saw him as a symbol of strength and fearlessness? In the months leading up to his death, those closest to Bourdain began to notice subtle but troubling changes. His relationship with actress Asia Argento, while passionate, was tumultuous and riddled with public controversy. Tabloid headlines and social media outbursts only added fuel to the fire. Had the pressures of their highly scrutinized relationship begun to push him over the edge? And if so, why didn't anyone see it coming? Behind the camera, the man who had spent years exploring the beauty of the world couldn't escape the darkness of his own mind. The constant travel, the long hours, and the weight of his public persona were taking their toll. But Bourdain kept moving, kept working. Was he trying to outrun his problems? Or was the pressure simply too much for anyone to bear? Even his closest friends, like Eric Rippert, knew Bourdain was struggling, but they could never have imagined how deep the pain ran. After all, he had always managed to keep things together before. So what was different this time? Was there a final straw? Or had the cracks in Bourdain's seemingly indestructible armour been growing for far longer than anyone had realised? Anthony Bourdain had spent a lifetime pushing boundaries, both in his career and in his personal life. But as the hours passed on June 7th, it was clear that something inside him had reached a breaking point. The man who had spent decades guiding audiences through the world's most remote and dangerous corners was now facing his own uncharted territory, a battle he wouldn't survive. Part 3. The Final Hours. June 8th, 2018. For most people, it started like any other morning. But for Anthony Bourdain, it was the beginning of the end. As the clock ticked past 8 a.m, something felt off. He was supposed to meet his longtime friend Eric Rippert for breakfast, but he never showed. At first, it seemed like a simple delay. Maybe he overslept. Maybe he was exhausted from days of filming. But as the minutes turned into hours, the truth was far more unsettling. Where was Anthony Bourdain? Rippert, concerned but not panicked, tried calling Bourdain's phone. No answer. He knocked on his door. No response. What could have happened? Was Bourdain just resting? Or was there something more sinister at play? With each failed attempt to reach his friend, Ruppert's worry grew. The quiet hotel in the picturesque town of Kaysersberg, France, suddenly became the setting for an unfolding tragedy. Rupert, now fully alarmed, approached hotel staff, asking them to open Bourdain's door. What they found behind it was every friend's worst nightmare. Inside the room, Anthony Bourdain was gone. The man who captivated millions with his wit, charm, and curiosity was found lifeless, having taken his own life by hanging. The calm and beauty of the French countryside became the backdrop for one of the most shocking losses in modern pop culture. But how did it come to this? What had driven a man who seemed to have everything to such a tragic end? As the news spread, disbelief rippled across the globe. How could a man like Anthony Bourdain, who seemed to embrace life in its rawest, most visceral form, choose to leave it all behind? Fans, friends, and colleagues were stunned. Had anyone seen this coming? And if they had, why hadn't anyone been able to stop it? The immediate questions were followed by an outpouring of grief and confusion. Bourdain wasn't just a celebrity. He was an icon, someone who had shown the world that life was meant to be lived fully, unapologetically, and without fear. How could a man who seemed to love the world so deeply feel so lost within it? And then there was the lingering question. What had happened in those final hours? The day before, Bourdain had been working, filming for parts unknown, dining with Rupert, seemingly normal. But as the night set in, something changed. Alone in his hotel room, Bourdain faced a battle no one else could see. A battle he would ultimately lose. The final hours of Anthony Bourdain's life remain a mystery. There were no signs, no cries for help, no public breakdowns. But in that quiet room in France, the world lost one of its most brilliant minds. And the question remains, why? What had gone through Bourdain's mind in those moments before his death? Was it the pressure of his public persona? The loneliness of constant travel? Or the weight of a personal life in turmoil? No one knows for sure. But one thing is clear. Bourdain's final decision left the world not only shocked, but questioning how someone who seemed to live so fearlessly could be hiding so much pain. Part 4. The Aftermath. As the news of Anthony Bourdain's death hit the headlines, the world was left in a state of collective shock. How could someone so full of life, who had spent years encouraging others to explore the world with open arms, be gone so suddenly? And more importantly, how could a man so outwardly successful and admired feel such immense despair? The immediate reaction was disbelief, quickly followed by grief, an unshakable sense that something deeply valuable had been lost forever. But behind the sadness, there was something else lurking. Confusion. What really happened in that quiet French hotel room? Eric Rupert, the man who discovered his friend's body, was left devastated. Rupert had been with Bourdain through countless adventures, and now he had to face the unimaginable. He hadn't just lost a friend. He had witnessed the tragic end of a man who had seemed untouchable. Was there anything Rupert could have done? Had there been signs that went unnoticed? Subtle cries for help that were overlooked? These questions would haunt him, just as they would haunt Bourdain's fans and family. But it wasn't just those closest to him who felt the loss. Across the globe, tributes began pouring in from celebrities, chefs, and ordinary people who had been inspired by Bourdain's fearless approach to life. Social media was flooded with stories of how Bourdain had influenced countless individuals to break out of their comfort zones, to travel, and to appreciate the world's diversity. Yet amid all the tributes, one question remained on everyone's mind. Why did this happen? The media wasted no time in speculating. Bourdain's relationship with actress Asia Argento quickly became a focal point. Just days before his death, photos of Argento with another man surfaced online, and rumours of infidelity began to swirl. Was this the trigger for Bourdain's decision? Had their relationship troubles pushed him to the edge? Or was it merely one piece of a much larger puzzle? As the speculation grew, so did the scrutiny. Critics dissected every aspect of Bourdain's life: his relationship with Argento, his constant travel, his previous struggles with addiction. Was it the relentless pressure of fame and the isolation that comes with it? The grind of producing parts unknown, constantly being in the public eye, and never having a moment to truly disconnect? Or was this something that had been building for years, masked by his outward charm and wit? While the world mourned, the conversation surrounding Bourdain's death took on a darker tone. Had the signs been there all along, hidden in plain sight? Friends recalled moments when Bourdain seemed unusually down, and his social media posts in the months leading up to his death painted a picture of a man increasingly weighed down by the demands of his career and personal life. But as always with suicide, the answer remained elusive. Was it one tragic moment of impulsivity? Or had the man who introduced the world to its most remote corners been secretly struggling with his own inner darkness for far longer than anyone realized? These were the questions no one could answer. The aftermath of Bourdain's death wasn't just about mourning the loss of a beloved figure. It was about grappling with the uncomfortable reality that even those who seem to have it all can be struggling behind closed doors. And perhaps, most tragically, it forced us to confront the fact that sometimes, no matter how much someone is loved or admired, it's not enough to keep them from slipping away. Conclusion: the unanswered questions. Anthony Bourdain's death left the world reeling, not just because of the loss of an iconic figure, but because of the profound questions it raised. How could a man who had spent his life embracing the world's cultures, flavors, and experiences come to such a tragic end? How could someone who seemed to have it all, fame, success, influence, feel so utterly alone? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, could anything have been done to stop it? In the days, weeks, and months following his death, those who knew him best searched for the answers. But the truth is that we may never fully understand what led Bourdain to that fateful decision. Was it the accumulation of years of emotional and mental strain? The pressures of living life under a microscope? Or was it something deeper, something that had always been there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to strike. One thing is certain. Anthony Bourdain's voice may have been silenced, but his impact will be felt for generations.